Hello, John Vũ. Hello, Thu Trang. Nice to see you. Hi, everyone. All right, we have gotten 65, 68 people coming in. Thank you for all the likes. Thanks so much. You're flattering me. But we've been waiting for a while until we've got some more than 100 people joining, and then we can start with our session today. How's everybody doing today? Enjoying yourselves? Working? Skipping work? School? What's up? Hello, Mylan. Oh, my mom is watching this session, so probably I cannot say anything bad about her in this session. Good afternoon, everyone. All right, we've got 77 people, 30 more to go. So today we will go into the third session. Oh, hi Bing, you're pretending to work hard today. Isn't that what you do every day? Today we are going into our third session of project management. In this series, we will talk about how to effectively manage our projects, as it has become a more pressing and urgent issue. We have to be able to control what we can to deliver the result. Our limited resources are there for us to allocate them, and how to use these resources in the best way that can ensure the deliverable, which is the result, the end game, to be perfect. So that is what we have been talking about in project management. And project management can be, you can define it as a method. We can also say that it's a philosophy, a way of life, a way of thinking. It's a mental framework that we follow in order to that we follow in order to become more efficient in our lives. I'm not talking only about projects like governmental projects, marketing projects, launching projects, startup project. Everything we do in a day could be a project, as long as it's not a routine work that we are supposed to do every single day. So going to work is probably not a project. But going away for a business trip, packing, preparing everything, having an agenda, having a result, and trying to manage the time, the travel, the budget, everything could be considered a project. So in our daily lives, we face the need to be more and more efficient. If we want to advance in our career, get back our social life, have kind of like a work-life balance, we have to be ruthlessly prioritizing. We have to be able to manage all of the things that come to us because we only have 24 hours a day. And that's basically our resources. So we've only got enough that, and what we want to do is use it to our best understanding, to our best efficiency, and how to get the best output, the most output out of the same input. So what makes you better than your competitor, what makes you better than your colleagues, if you want to advance in this life, in your career, is your ability to do more with less. And we can do that with project management. So in the first session, we talked about the mentality and the type of management. In the second part, we talk about lean project management. We talk about waterfall project management. So today I will introduce to you the third. Hi, Dan. Nice to see you again. So the third of project management, of course, there are many different forms and types, but I'm giving you the ones that is a little bit more updated, something that's used more in small and medium-sized companies or startup teams or software development companies. So one of it is the spiral model. In the spiral model, we will talk about the definition of win-win spiral, key characteristic and elements in it. So the origin of the spiral model is this. Barry Boehm, born in 1935, he is an American software engineer. So this is probably older than my grandmother compared to that. But at the time, the software engineering market has already been extremely successful in the US. And he's a distinguished professor of computer science, industrial and system engineering. Yada, yada, yada. He is known for many contributions to this area of software. So we can say that the spiral model was born, as many other project management softwares, in the age where the IT and software systems have been developed really well. So he created one of the thing called constructive cost model, the spiral model of the software process, the theory of W, theory of win-win, approach to software management, and the requirement determination and two advanced software engineering environments, the TRW software productivity system and the quantum leap environment. That's a lot of words, but we'll focus on the spiral model. So what happens is this. The problem that this model was trying to solve was the debate about software lifecycle model in the 80s and in the 90s, the lack of flexibility. So in the beginning, as we were looking at other models, such as waterfall model, we see that it's not enough flexibility, blah, blah. And because of that reason, the development process is too slow because people couldn't change their track fast enough. They couldn't adapt to things fast enough. And that's why the development process was very low. Secondly, the concrete results are obtained too late. We had to wait a really long time before we can see the final result of our efforts. And because of that reason, it made it extremely difficult to measure the success of a project from the beginning. Thirdly, it was difficult to separate the what's of requirement, like what is required, and the how's, the technical design. The hows are supposed to be the answer, the solution, the what. I want this to happen. And then somebody else would try to find a way to make it happen if I was a project owner. But now people cannot separate the what's and the hows, and everything just get jumbled up together. So the changes are required in the systems are recognized too late because the software engineering, the technology, the environment, the requirement from our people, they change all the time. So in order for us to best deliver the product, we have to be able to be flexible and adopt to change. However, if the old model is rigid, is waterfall, this after this after this, then it will be very difficult that we will realize when our changes needs to be done and what has changed. So in terms of the waterfall model, let's go over that. At that time, what they used to do is the initiation of the project in the beginning. All we do, it's truly boring, but it takes a lot of skill, is requirement analyzing. Today I had talk with my employees, and we keep having this problem where have you had this experience as a boss, or have you had this experience as an employee? You talk and then people say, oh, I'm sorry, I did something wrong because I did not get what you mean. And this get what you mean is a pandemic. It is flooding in every single organization, and people keep having this problem that the layers below the management cannot understand the requirement or are misunderstanding it. And this creates a huge gap between the information that was provided and the result that was returned. Because of that, in project management, what we do is we analyze requirement. We ask questions to make sure that everybody is on the same page and understands what is required of them. We look at all of these requirements and we ask ourselves, what does it mean? Because it's not only this, it's a lot of things behind it. So this requirement also implies another requirement, a sub-requirement. This requirement, is it possible or not? Is it doable or not? And does it conflict with another requirement? We look at all of these things and we try to analyze them and find the differences. We find what's wrong with the requirement. We will find what's right with the requirement. So after analyzing this, we will go into designing the solution. We haven't even started on implementing, on doing the project yet, just designing work. We design how everything is going to be done. We design who's going to be on the team, who's doing what is going to be delivered, and how it's going to be delivered. From then, after all the planning is done, we will go right into development. That's when we could start doing something. In the meantime, after that, we will test everything. And after we test it, we will maintain it. So that's how softwares are made. But even buildings, bridges, roads are constructed in the same way. The strong point of this waterfall is what? It works well when the software requirements are well understood. So there's no misunderstanding and it's easy enough. People have experience with this kind of project before. And the nature of the software development involves contractual agreements, which means that there's a lot of contracts. The second thing is, it is a natural fit for contract-based software development because this model is very documented. Everything needs to be written down. The requirement analysis, document, report. The design, a stack of paper. Development, also a lot of paper. Testing, also test reports. Everything is documented, and that's why it could work as well as a legal proof that something is being done well or being done in a need improvement kind of a way. Then, but the drawback of the system is, according to Boehm, this model does not really work well with many types of software, particularly the kind of like interactive software that can work with end user, because it's too rigid, because it's not flexible, because it doesn't take into consideration a lot of change. The problem is that a contract is signed even before the real requirement of the system are properly understood. Somebody briefs to you and they give you an opportunity. Hey, do you want to carry out this project? We will get this much money. So as you can see in Vietnam, it's the same way. We have a lot of contractors. They go into a contract with the government, you know, building a bridge, building a road. And then they say, oh my God, our budget is under the budget. The requirements have changed. Why is our train system still not working? People keep talking about not being able to understand the requirement. That is because the model shows that people will join into a contract without even understanding what is required from the contract. So they get a lot of unfortunate surprises when they finally do the project. And these surprises will make the project slower, more costly, yada, yada, yada. And then the waterfall model provides no means for risk assessment during the life cycle. So because you have to keep going down and carrying more work, there's no time for you to go back and see, oh, there's a risk. Also remember, waterfall system doesn't allow us to go back and redo something. We have to move forward, not backwards. So it doesn't give opportunity for remedy, for change, for reviewing the way we carry out things. So in 1988, this guy, Boehm, he proposed a more comprehensive life cycle, that he realized that the spiral model can address the inadequacies of the waterfall model. The model of the waterfall model is rigid. You just fall down, another waterfall and waterfall. But the spiral doesn't work in that direction. The spiral works in a circular direction. That's the main difference between waterfall and spiral. The spiral was the major distinguishing feature of the spiral model is that it creates a risk-driven approach. So everybody is being very cautious about what kind of risk there are in the project and how to combat them. It creates a primary document-driven and a code-driven process. It incorporates many of the strengths of the other models, and it resolves many of their difficulties. It's also one of my favorite models to work, actually. So the spiral models makes everything smaller. So it makes small project inside a big project. The model is an SDLC model used in IT development and also called the meta model. Don't even think about that. We can use that in normal life. It doesn't have to be in IT. It is a combination of iterative development process model called prototyping, which means that just making a prototype. Before you can scream and say that, oh, it's impossible to do this project, all you need to do is come up with small prototype, which is a test model, not the complete final version. And sequential linear development model of the waterfall model. The spiral model is favored for large, expensive, complicated project. Because it's large, it can be broken down into smaller projects, which is better than waterfall. It's expensive, so it doesn't allow for a lot of risk or slowing down. But the waterfall can easily make us run after the project and fail and go under the budget. But the spiral model, however, helps us calibrate, kind of like refocus if there's something wrong. And that's why for complicated project, it is extremely popular. This is a risk reduction oriented model. Remember when we talk about the lean business model, the lean project management model last time, it is more of a waste mentality. So cut waste, cut waste, cut waste. Six Sigma, the same thing. Cut defect, less wrong models, blah, blah. And then we have a spiral model, which is less risk, and less risk. So the spiral model is the waterfall model, as you can see here. It goes from the top, which is analysis. You cannot go back and you have to keep going to design. After you design, you cannot change your design. You have to develop. Even if you develop wrongly, you have to test. And after you test, you maintain it. What happens is that it doesn't give you the right to say, oops, we did something wrong, let's fix it. The spiral, on the other hand, as you can see, goes through the same exact phase, but in a spiral direction, which makes that you can always come back to where you start. And this is prototype mode. We'll talk about it later. So this is the spiral model. As you can see, there is identification and evaluation. Each loop is carried out in the same way. Each loop or iteration in the spiral represents a waterfall model. So it is an evolution of the waterfall, which we do the same thing. We still analyze, we'll still design, we'll still implement, and we still test. But we don't do that for the whole big thing. We do it for small, cut it into a piece. So we a big project. For example, let's just give an example. You're cooking for 50 people. So instead of doing that and go, analyzing the requirements, go ask everyone, what do you want to eat? What do you want to eat? And then start designing. Okay, this much money for this person, this much money for one person budget. We will cook this much, and then just cooking. And then you show up, and then what happened? Sometimes people don't show up. And you have a lot of products, a lot of food that nobody eats. Sometimes some people show up that were not invited and you don't have enough food. Sometimes you started cooking and you realize that you have forgotten about some very important ingredient, but the waterfall model doesn't allow you to come back. So what the spiral model would do is, okay, one thing at a time. The first thing is they cut the budgeting, for example, going shopping into a small project. So with shopping, you start analyzing the shopping needs. What do we need? What kind of food? How much budget do we want? Then you will go shopping, implement design. You go shopping, then you come back, you see the result. You check the result testing, and you realize you make a mistake. That's completely fine. You go back, before you start cooking, you go back, you fix it. You start buying more or you handle it. The same thing with the cooking, because you're cooking for 50 people. So you might cook every dish, instead of cooking every dish at the same time, you make one dish at the same time, analyzing the requirement. So which means that you're probably not cooking alone. You're telling your staff, your help, your son, your daughters, your friends, your family, your sister and brother, you say, okay, this is cook. This is what you're supposed to cook. This is the formula. This is the recipe. Just work on the set recipe. Do you have any questions? No questions? Done. Then you see them do a prototype. They will do a design and a testing. You test a little bit. You say, oh, that's very tasty. And then you say, okay, now do it 10 times more. So that's why we just keep going in spiral. You move to the next project, which is your brother who's cooking something else. And you do the same exact thing. This is your recipe. That's how you do it. Do you have any questions? Start making a test. After you taste the test, you say, oh, that's very yummy. Keep doing that 100 times more. So by doing that, you as a project manager can cut down the project into smaller portions and go over and go over again. The second thing is the radius of the spiral at any point represents the expense of the project so far. So as you can see, as you go bigger and bigger, more time and money has been spent, so it becomes more and more expensive. And then the angular dimension represents the progress made so far in the current phase. So the spiral model is used when there is a budget constraint. Like I said, if you're cooking for 50 people, you don't want to be under budget. You don't want anybody to be hungry. So it helps us to kind of calibrate, because if your circle goes to the wrong direction, you can kind of say, oh, no, we have to fix this. And it's easy for us to fix the risk, and it's easy for us to fix the budget when we can. Secondly, when the customer is not sure about the requirement, when you were first given the idea about cooking for 50 people, there's no requirement. You don't know who are these people, how much do they eat, how much does one person eat, where are we going to have this ceremony, what should be on the menu, what is the price of fish or meat at this moment. You don't have a lot of information. That's why the spiral helps us to break down the project into smaller projects that we can check the requirement slowly and slowly. It doesn't overwhelm us. It doesn't make us go crazy because we know nothing. Thirdly, risk evaluation is very important. As you can see, the reason why we do small project and it's in a circle, so you can fix the circle every time something goes wrong. You fix it a little bit. Every time the circle gets bigger, you fix it a little bit. So it helps us to always move the project in the right direction without, just jumping in, doing things that we don't know what we are talking about. Requirements are complex and need evaluation to get clarity. So when the requirement, like I said, is very complicated and it's impossible for one person to know it at one point, it's the time to do spiral. For medium to high risk project. So if the project is under a very strict budget, if we don't have a lot of time and we know nothing about the requirements, it means also that the risk for that project is quite high. And that is when this model is the best. The product line in which should be released in phases to get enough customer feedback. So the same thing with the iOS and the iPhone. As you can see, the way that they upgrade the iPhone every time is still the same. They designed the iOS. They release iOS 12.000. Then we test it and we say there's so many bugs, my iPhone keeps crashing. Then Apple releases 12.1.1. So what they do is exactly what Apple does with the iOS is spiral model. They came out with a prototype. They get the feedback and then they fix the feedback, they release it again. But with every release, the iOS becomes better, more stable, and more efficient. So exactly that is something that we do if we need to get market feedback. When it's a long-term project commitment and a significant changes are expected in the product. So of course, in terms of, let's do the Apple example. If there are only 100 people using the software, probably we don't see a lot of bugs or crashes or problems with our iPhones. But we've got, billions of people using it. So what happens is when that many people use it, there will be different scenario, a billion way to break your iPhone, a billion way for iOS to crash. So from that, we realize that we need to get the market feedback because the requirement from the beginning is impossible for the developers to understand what kind of risk and what kind of problems might arise in the future. So how do we use this model? The spiral model is used by represent a diagram for the spiral model. There are two perpendicular lines that are drawn to divide the plane into 4 regions. These 4 regions correspond to 4 work areas. If moving clockwise and starting from the upper left quadrant, we have the correspondent as 1, 2, 3, 4. And we have object identification, alternate evaluation, product, and next planning phase, which means that then what we have to do in the beginning, what do we got to do? That's the first question you got to ask. What is that we have to do at this moment? After we have identified our objective, we look at, so how many ways can we solve this problem? We don't look for one solution. We look for alternate evaluation. We look and we evaluate the risk, what's going to happen, what's the problem, what might be the risk, what is the way we can do it, what are our options. After we have gotten that all out of the window, then we will go into the product, making the product the prototype. And from then on, after we finish the product, we plan for the next phase. What do we do next week? What should we do? What is the best thing to do? So it keeps going all the time like that, but waterfall happens still. We still do risk management, we still do prototype, we still do design, code, integration, test, yada, yada, yada. So every time we release, we review, we do communicate, and then we spend money and cost and time, we release and we review again. It's the same way that Apple is releasing their iPhones and their iOS. So, considering the intersection of the 2 straight lines at the center, we draw the spiral lines going through the inside to the outside using a clockwise direction. Helical length will represent the cumulative price of the software because we're spending more time and money on people and human resource. A circle of spiral will represent a phase. So each circle, this one circle, is one phase. You go from the beginning, which is nothing, to design, release, and then review, and then planning again. So that one circle is one spiral of a phase. So with that, we have different phases. In its diagrammatic representation, it looks like a spiral with many loops. The exact number of loops of the spiral is unknown until we can be finally satisfied with the end product. So the same thing with Apple. Do we know how many iOS will Apple release at the end of its life? We don't, because it's increasingly improved. Every time there is new technology, there is a new iPhone, there is a new app coming out, they will change and they will try to make a better iOS system. So we never know what is the exact number of loops at the end. Each loop of the spiral is called a phase of the software development process. And as the project manager dynamically determines the number of phases, so the project manager has an important role, which is to develop a product using the spiral model to think and plan and strategize. As you can see, here we will we will think about the next objective. What do we have to do? What options do we have, alternative, and what constraint? What is our difficulty? From then on, we will go into risk analysis. We have to check what is wrong, what can go wrong, what's the risk. From then on, we create the first prototype. After that, we will concept of operation. We will try different models and we will check everything and test it. From then on, we will plan the next phase. Oh, this product is released, let's do a next phase. Again, you will see what else are we going to do. You would also do risk analysis. You will make prototype 2, which is the upgraded version of prototype 1. You will also check and design and acceptance and code and link everything together and then report, and then you release it. And then you make a plan for the next phase. This just keeps going on and on and on. So each phase of the spiral model is divided into 4 quadrants, as shown in the above. The functions of these is planning, risk analysis, engineering, which is implementation, and lastly, which is evaluation before we go back to planning for the new phase. So the quadrant number 1, the planning quadrant, what do we do in this phase? In this phase, objective is we have to think about the functionality. So if you are designing a car, what function does it have? It's just for driving. Okay, good. Does it have a great stereo system? What kind of motor does it have? Is the car for family use or for dual use, or is that car for transport, for like a truck, for transporting goods? Think about performance. Is that car, the motor, is it a V8 super fast motor for, racing? Or is it just a normal car for family use that doesn't have high performance, but it needs to have safety performance? Then you have to think about the hardware and software. What kind of car is that? Is it a 4-seater? Is it a 7-seater, 16-seater? How is it going to look like? And then you think about the success factor. What is required for it to be completely successful? After you have determined all of this issue, that's when we go into alternatives. So do we have to build a new one? Can we reuse something? Can we subcontract? Can you let somebody do it instead of us? The same thing with the spiral model. They could have made a brand new model, but they decided that they will use the waterfall model. And from the waterfall model, they upgraded it into the spiral model that is more easier to use and easier to adapt. After you have gotten a whole menu of alternatives, what I can do with it, what's the point, what the different thing we can do, then we'll think about the constraints. So what is our risk? Money. Do we have enough money? What is the cost? Schedule. How long do we need to finish it? Interface. Do we need to follow a certain interface? From then on, procedure to follow is, first, we need to gather the business requirement. We need to check and ask everybody what we need. Then we estimate the cost and we plan for the schedule. How long does it take? What's going to be done first and what's going to be done second and third and fourth? We need to identify necessary resources and work environment. So how many people do we want? Do we need a car? Do we need a lot of computers? Do we need a big room? What do we need to make it happen? And then we make business requirement specifications and system requirement specifications, which are two documents that define all the things that we need. This is eventually being approved by the boss, the chairman, the CEO, the project manager, so they can give you the resources and the money that you ask for. After that, the 4 questions you need to raise in quadrant number 1. How do we get started? What is the first thing we do? When is it appropriate to terminate this project? What if something goes wrong? When can we terminate it? When do we say, that's it, we stop, and this is a failure? Why does the spiral end so suddenly? And what happens when the software is upgraded? What happens when we change it? So those are the 4 questions that you need to answer. Then you move on to the second quadrant, the pink one, which is the risk analysis. After you have identified all the things that you need to do, what we do is you analyze whether the risk is significant or not. Here, we have to evaluate alternatives and identify and resolve risk. So we study alternatives. Option 1, so if you are cooking, so as you know, in Vietnam, for family anniversaries, for ceremonies, a lot of times we make the women overwork and they work really hard to create this kind of huge dinner where everybody's just eating and cleaning up dishes is our job. So my mom, when she was cooking for the family, she gets stressed every day. Every time she does it, she has to wake up from 4 a.m. in the morning and go shopping for so many people. And then she cooks for the whole day. She doesn't get to eat. And then she has to clean the dishes right after that. So I told her one day, Mom, that's a really bad project management. So let's identify the requirement. What is the requirement? I'm a little bit more Western, so I'm not very familiar with these kind of things. And she said that, well, everybody just wants to have fun and eat and drink. And I'm like, okay, so is the requirement, the food that they eat, does it have to come from you? And she's like, you're right. It doesn't really have to come from me, but it should be because, I'm the daughter-in-law, I'm the woman in the family. I'm like, okay, fine. You make one dish. I will order 9 different dishes. So then she's like, okay, let's do that. So she wakes up at 7 a.m. She cooks one dish. I order the rest of the 9 dishes in the budget that is allowed for, buying the same things. But of course, we try to buy from the places that are very good in, their menus is good, their cooking is good. And at the time, to be honest, people just want to, drink and talk and spend some family time instead of actually cooking like a food critique. So what we do is we order that. Secondly, I said, does it really matter if you wash the dishes or not? As long as the dishes are washed, right? So that is a requirement. So we have another alternative, which is hiring someone to come and clean the dishes. So, I mean, probably you would think that that is not a very good daughter. If I was a good daughter, I probably would jump in and cook with her and clean with her. But I'm a project manager. What I do is manage projects, not cleaning dishes. So alternative was very simple. Hire somebody, subcontract that to somebody else. We have other alternatives. Of course, bring everybody to a restaurant. That's one alternative. Secondly, ask everybody who comes, each of the women, bring a type of food. So everyone only cooks once. And then hire somebody to clean. Things like that. So we have different alternatives depending on which one we choose. So going to the restaurant probably will be a little bit more over the budget and too expensive and not very comfortable for people to sit down and talk together. Okay, let's do it at home. So let's order catering. Let's order people to come in and bring in the food and we'll pay for that. Asking people to bring food is probably not a good thing because, they might be horrible cooks and I don't tolerate bad food. So I don't let people bring food to my house. I can order it, but I will not do that. So that is my alternative. After doing that, we hired cleaning people. And then, the whole thing was even more on time, more on budget, and easier for everyone. That is what we do for evaluating alternative and quadrant 2. So the same thing with software engineering. We have to think about, do we carry out this part of the code in-house, we code it, or we hire somebody, subcontract, because our resources, our people are running out of time. We have a time constraint. You can hire a subcontract somebody else to do that part of the work. At the same time, you have to think, if we hire someone else, would it be easy for us to fix if they have a problem? How expensive is hiring compared to doing it yourself? Those are things we do in the session 2. So after that, we will go to identify risk. What is the risk? The risk that it might not arrive on time. The risk of going over the budget. The risk of the product being under the standard. Bad deliverable. And finally, we resolve the risk. So for example, in terms of the food, what if the food doesn't arrive early enough? Well, okay, then let's sign a contract or order that makes them bring the food 2 hours before. Then we have another risk that everything will be saggy. It's not hot anymore. It's not tasty anymore. All right, so 1 hour before that, after we've checked everything, we will try to recook everything, heat it up, refry something, throw it in the microwave, blah, blah. So we have to think about every risk that could happen in this phase, analyze them, and then we will improve and have a plan to resolve all that risk. So the risk analysis is a process undertaken to identify risk and alternative solutions. What happens if people don't come? Well, I will say, if that's the case, then we can pack everything and send it to people to bring home. That is also an alternative and a potential risk solution. A prototype is a produce that at the end of the risk analysis, we make it kind of like a fixed one. So what do we do? What's a prototype? If you have gotten married before, you know that now if you want to book a hotel, well, probably. So we've got one person who is not very polite. So if you're not interested, please do something else with your life. Anyways, for the rest of you, let's go back. So a process is, the produce is, if you go and book for a wedding, usually now the bride and the groom, they can go into a hotel tasting event where you can taste every single dish and you can try every one that you like or you don't like. You can check for allergies and then you decide to book. So that is a way that grooms and brides, people who are getting married, are trying to minimize the risk of wrong booking because they cannot rebook the hotel in a short period of time. So if any risk found during the risk analysis, then we alternate solutions are suggested and we will implement them. And lastly, identification of potential risk is done, while risk mitigation strategy is planned and finalized. So in the quadrant 2 risk analysis, to manage risk of a phase in each spiral, Boehm uses the form below to assess the risk during a software development process. The rows represents different management elements in the project. For each new phase, he created a new instance of patterns to review the status of the project. So for example, the objective. You explain the goal of the software product and you have an example, significantly improve software quality. The constraint is limitations in which the project must meet. And the example is, within 3 years, without large-scale capital investment, there will be problems. So you use this form to kind of find all of the problems. So what is the risk? The potential risk for this phase is no cost-effective quality improvement. And the solution is, you do a pilot project, tasting the food before ordering. That's something. And then in phase 3, engineering. The quadrant 3, we develop the next level product. This is when we actually go into doing. And I swear to God, I have a problem with my staff a lot in this phase. A lot of times the staff, they are very eager to do something. They are, very hardworking. They want to create deliverable and they want to start now. But if you're a project manager, you plan, you analyze, you design, and then you do. But as Vietnamese people, we will try to get the fastest result as possible. And we have to remember, that's not the objective. The best result, not the fastest result. And the fastest result might not be able to find the right requirement, to satisfy the right requirement. So be sure you understand why I keep yapping about, planning, designing, yada, yada. So in this level, what we do is we develop the next product by creating a design. We review that design, develop the code, inspect the code, and test the product. So in the quadrant 4, and we plan it, typically activities include develop project plan, configuration management plan, test plan, installation plan. Really boring stuff. So after we have developed and released it, we plan for the next stage. In the final stage, the ending of the first spiral, what we do is we will go back all over again. We plan for the new software, for the new upgrade, and for what's to be done next. So to summarize, quadrant planning, we do the activities performed are requirements are being studied and gathered together. We do feasibility study. We check everything if it's possible, if the project can die easily. We review and walk through the streamline of the requirement. And our deliverable and output is understanding that document. It's really just understanding that document. And we finalize list of requirement. This list will become handy later on when at the end of the requirement, when we want to get the money for the project that we carried out, we show them this is the requirement. And we have completed every single one of them. Give me my money. The risk analysis, what we do is requirements are still being studied and we brainstorm to see if there's potential risk. The plan might sound very nicely, but there are always risks hidden somewhere in the idea. Once we found those risks, we put them into the risk log where we write down every single risk and we think about each plan. What's going to happen if it arrives late? What's going to happen if it rains? What is going to happen if it's late? All of those things need to have a plan B, a backup plan. Finally, we go into engineering, which we implement, develop, and test what we did. And the output would be test result, the real code, the product. And finally, it's evaluation, where we go back and we evaluate everything and we implement features, implement document. So the strength of this model is this. It's suitable cost, because in the early iteration, it's very cheap. You don't need to do too much. And the highest risk to be addressed from the beginning. Secondly, it's customized. Each iteration gives you time to say, oh, I want to do this and I want to do that. And we can tailor it. We can customize it to suit the current situation. It's also very flexible. And we can change the model as soon as we see a change and a risk change. We can manage risk. We can put in the customer, like the same way that iOS updates are doing. And finally, it's perfect for large project, because you cannot plan waterfall with a really large project without thinking that you can be wrong. Spiral allows you to be wrong. So it's late change handling. If the change comes late in the project and you're like, oh my God, and you're screaming, then you still have the time to give alternative solution. It's easier for project management because you cut it into small parts. So you don't need a lot of imagination, or you don't need to manage too many things at one time. It's predictable, and it has a great document control, because after each spiral, you already have a list, a documented list. All right. So the strength, those are the 7 strengths. The weakness, however, it still has weakness. The first thing is that it is expensive. The spiral model can become expensive because the people who can do spiral are usually very expensive staff. You need to have really experts at project management and risk analysis. Even the project takes a huge amount of time, and as you can see, we do not know the last number of spirals, so it can be indefinitely large. Secondly, it's very complex, even though it makes it more simple, but the bigger the spiral, the more complex it's going to be, and it forces you to be extremely disciplined. The time management, one of the disadvantages of the spiral model is the time management, is because we don't know what the phases are. So if you need that project in 5 days, but you have, each phase is 1 day, but you realize that now you need 7 phases, 7 spirals. So which means that 7 circles. It means that your project will go over the time budget. And I have this problem a lot because I use spiral in my companies a lot. So a lot of times I have to say I have problems with time management for this reason. And lastly, too many documentation, which is also my fault because we use this. So my employees are going crazy because they have to write documents all the time. So sometimes people would say, hey, I am a coder. I'm not born to write documents. Why are you making me do that? Well, I'm trying to tell him nobody understands your code. So if you want your project to go really smoothly and people can get transferred your technology, you've got to do the technical documentation. But of course, they hate it. Some people will say, I'm a marketer. My job is marketing, not planning for marketing. Even my partner and my partners complain a lot. They say, Nikia, we need to do something really quickly, and we have no time for planning. But again, I keep trying to tell them, if we are working in a world where everybody's professional, if the quality of the work can be controlled easily, I would completely agree with you. But right now in Vietnam, we have a lot of risk, a lot of potential problems with the result, the end result, the budget. So I have to do this. So this is me being disciplined about that, but it has weakness. It makes people frustrated. Your staff, yourself, and your partners can easily be frustrated. And it could be very expensive because of the unlimited loops. So if we compare the waterfall and the spiral model, the stages in the waterfall, the strength is the stages are defined with a clear output and inputs. And the model is based on data, so from the early stage. So input and output are all documented. The spiral model is the risk assessment analysis is pushed up as an essential part of the spiral to create a project reliability. And it combines the best features of the waterfall model, actually. Another strength of waterfall is it is a series of software activity that is a sequence, analysis, then design, and then implement, test, and then link. Finalize. But in spiral model, it is better because it can change each step. It can make some change. It's not too rigid. The weakness, on the other hand, the waterfall, it makes people have to be completely clear from the beginning, which is almost impossible to do. Nobody can predict the future to a point that you know everything that's going to happen. and predict everything. So spiral model has, on the other hand, has a weakness that even though it allows for change, but it's not very suitable for small project with little risk because it's too complicated. It takes too much time. Another weakness of waterfall is users cannot come in. You have to wait until the product is done. It's like a surprise party. You have to wait until everybody surprises you. And sometimes you don't like that surprise very much and it's difficult to change back. Especially for large project, users can only realize the software at the end. And if the software, the clients say, oh, I don't like it, I don't need it, nobody's liking it, then you can go bankrupt very easily. In general, the waterfall model often contains many risks that can only be detected at the final stage when everything is too late, and the cost of repair is very high. However, the spiral model, even though it improves that, but it needs a really high-skilled people in risk analysis. So the application is in non-complicated system, unstable goals, large project. GunPro is an example. I'm not going to go to the win-win because the win-win model is even a little bit more complicated, but it's if you have the time, please review it. It's very good for negotiation with international partnership and working with other people. Okay. It talks a lot about stakeholder, about business negotiation, about these kind of things. So if you can, please go through that. And with this, I am going to end my lecture on the spiral model today. Let's recap on the things that we have learned, okay? I'm going to go back. So let's recap. Project management. I know that even from the people who are watching right now, maybe it's my fault, it's not the topic's fault, but we don't have many people watching. The reason is, I don't blame you, but it is the feeling like these things are too theoretical and these things are too far apart. But I hope that for the 86 of you who are still watching, you understand that our country, actually any country, but especially our country, we are working in a place where we need a lot of room for development. Each of the development, opening a new school, fighting COVID-19, developing a new product, starting your company, all of those things are new projects. They can fail very easily. There are 99 ways for it to fail. And we need a different kind of skill set, which is project management skill, in order to do it better, faster, cheaper, and more accurately. And because of that, project management is a mentality that we always like, the same way that a mother takes care of the child, the same way that she's watching the child all the time. Don't do that, don't run, don't dress like that, don't do that, don't do that. The mother is always trying to make sure that the child is growing at the right speed, learning at the right speed, and not falling into some accident. As project managers, our job is not doing the work, but designing a system that can be automated. It has to be automated. The management system, reporting system, risk analysis system is something that helps us make sure that our project doesn't die early and can grow up to be a great project. So these kind of projects are extremely important in the 21st century. If you want to advance in your career, you have to be able to solve the problem that your boss or your company is giving you. When you're solving this problem, you have to understand you need to do it fast, efficiently, and the output, the result has to be correct. So by doing that, we have to apply different mental models. So waterfall is the way of doing that makes everybody work the same way. So what happens, another question I asked a lot is when I was learning this topic was, what happens if somebody in the team is doing spiral, another team is doing waterfall, and another person is doing Kanban, for example? Is it possible? Yes, it is possible, but that would be a disaster. What happens is because they have different philosophy. If you are doing Kanban, you're just thinking about more result, no timing. It's kind of similar to spiral. So if your project manager needs to show up and need to release the iOS, the new iPhone in September, then there's so much risk of it not happening. Look at how Apple never failed to organize the keynote speech. Look at our country never fails to do a countdown at the end of the year. Look at how children never fail to go to school. Well, this year, or 1 day late. All of this precision requires that we manage the outcome. And without this kind of step, and people need to talk the same language, they need to use the same model, and they need to think the same philosophy. So if you're using waterfall, you need why, you need waterfall. Waterfall project management method is something that makes sure that everything is planned from the beginning. No room for change. It helps people move super fast because you never look back. You just look at the plan, you do it. Look at the plan, do it. So the only problem is, well, what if you misunderstood the beginning? What if the project manager just did a stupid mistake and they got the whole requirement wrong? Well, yeah, you go bankrupted. But it makes the project extremely fast. So that's why waterfall is usually used in construction business, where the drawings, the design, everything is fixed. Then we've got the lean project management system that was used by Motorola. It's used by Motorola, Henry Ford, Ford Motor, Toyota. Toyota invented the Toyota production things, you know? And this is what I mean. I am so sorry. I hope it's more interesting. My fault, my bad. But think about it. Why, you know, VinFast. We have our first automobile brand, I think 2 years ago. It's when VinFast came. And Japan has made it in the 1950s, 1960s. How is that possible that in 2009, Toyota, another Asian country, you know, Japan, was the #1 automobile company in the world? How did they become so efficient? Well, they designed the TPS, which is the Toyota production system, which is a lean manufacturing system that we learned about last session, you know, almost 100 years ago. Because they realized that in order to compete, in order to make everything faster, easier, manage well, they need to have a set of philosophy that was able to help the country or the company compete efficiently, do less with more, do more with less money, less time, less human capital, less all of that for more development. So in our case, if you are in project management, all I can tell you is there are so many different models. I'm just introducing you to different types, you know, lean, PMP, Prince2, Spiral, Kanban, Scrumban. Those are just the form, the ulterior of project management. The inside, the real philosophy of project management is, please understand that everything in this life, in your life, in our economy, our country, everything has a constraint. We have a limited number of time we can live. We have a limited number of energy we can give every day. Our willpower, our intelligence, everything has a limit. So because of that, we need to make more with less. We need to be more efficient at allocating different things. You can choose a spiral. If it's kind of like a philosophy base that comes from, the philosophy is risk, risk, risk. If you want to have a philosophy of waterfall, which is moving forward, never go back. If you want to go with lean, which is less and less, it doesn't matter. Find something that is suitable for you and suitable for who you are as a person. But please remember, this kind of work that we do every day, mindless work, not having a clear philosophy in what we do, even the way you dress every day, the way you have a meeting, the way you go to work, the way you take your family out to go to the beach, a dinner with your family, each of it is a project. If you don't have a plan, if you don't have a philosophy, if you don't have a proper way to do it easier, and you're just mindlessly doing it, then you need project management, because you're probably wasting a lot of your capital. And with that, I want to end today. Thank you, Chang, for your comments. It's very kind. And so, comparison table among those models. All right, thank you, Chang. I actually have a comparison model right here. I can cut it and comment it on the somewhere, but there's so many models. So here I have the comparison model between the waterfall, prototype, and spiral. but we will go through, you know, Kanban, Lean, and there's so many different comparison types. In my opinion, you should think about the philosophy first, and then you can find information on comparison in terms of the way to do time and risk very easily later on. So here is a strength. You can see the screen cap if possible, the difference. Then there is a difference in weakness. And I can, you know, find a way to give it to you later. Thank you so much for being here. Anybody has any questions today after this? I am a OCD freak, to be honest. I am crazy about sorting and analyzing and putting everything in one place. It's kind of like my passion. I know it's a very boring passion, but it's mine. So I have spent a lot of time researching these models. And in the end, even if you learn this class or not, or go take a test or PMP or not, I think it is the discipline, the way that we understand how our brain works. We learn how organizations, the dynamic of organizations, and how do people work together. And we are crazy about managing risk, managing time, managing the result. That is the most important thing. Honestly, I do think that our labor force in Vietnam has a problem with not seeing the output. When you are a university student, you go study and you think that as long as I have a degree, I can get a good job. Okay, fine. So the other day I talked to one of the really big engineers in wind power, and we were just in one of the top hotels in Vietnam having coffee, and we were at the coffee shop down there, and he was just saying, he's like, Nikki, how does it happen? You know, this is the most expensive place in Vietnam, and how can they be so inefficient? Why is she doing this and that and that? And I said, so my question, my challenge for him was, why does she need to do better? And then he just looked at me with awe. I don't mean to, you know, I mean to provoke him, because he asked me, well, why not? And I say, you have to ask yourself that. You are a German person. Maybe because of your education system, maybe because of your background growing up, your family education, that you think that people need to do that. But what is the need? You need to give them the why. So he said, well, for money. And I told him that even if they do it like that, they still get paid the same amount. There's no need to improve. So he thought about it very long and hard, and we laughed about it. So what I mean is, if one day we are facing the same problems like now we're facing COVID-19, which is our economy is very weak against, you know, any kind of turmoil, because we don't have reserves. Other countries, they have technology, they have habits, they have a strong workforce, they have natural reserves, and they have asset, which means that when something goes wrong, you still have asset to spend. The same way with your family. If you have lived without, you know, income, like I did for the past 8 months, taking a break, career break for 8 months, and your reserves, are you going to run out of reserves after 8 months? Where does your money come from every month? Where does the cost come from? But in our economy, we don't have that much reserves, to be honest. That's why we have to open our borders again. That's why we're opening flights again. That's why we are still going to work nowadays again, even though we are battling the situation. So what happens is, you cannot always rely on just work. We have to be able to create output, manage projects, and find a way to manage them better. Stop complaining about the roads not being constructed. Learn project management. Stop complaining about the government spending the money in a way that you don't like it. Learn project management. Stop complaining about so many construction sites not being finished. If we as people don't really change the way we look at work, we manage them, and upgrade our skill in management, then we will be in big trouble as individuals and as a whole country, because we will not be able to compete. So I know it's a very dry topic, but hopefully, even if you never come back to this subject, every day when you go and do something, plan it, see the risk, and make sure that you get the best output. And with that, thank you guys so much for staying with me. 73 of you. So, if you haven't been able to listen to the basic, you can go back, because the video will be here permanently. So thank you guys for coming, and have a great day. Bye. If you have questions, I'm here. I have 5 more minutes to shoot if you have any questions. Thank you, guys. Thanks. For long, you're looking for keywords. First, just look at project management methodology. Secondly, these are the common types. So Prince 2. Prince is like a prince and princess, and there's the number 2. Look for traditional project management, waterfall, look for lean project management, look for Sigma, number 6, and then Sigma, S-I-G-M-A. Those are the very common types of project management. Especially in software engineering, you will see Scrum, S-C-R-U-M, Scrumban, Kanban, and Spiral. So in the next session, I will talk about Kanban and Scrumban if possible, okay? All right. Bye-bye. I'll see you next week, the same time.